Welcome to the Spiritual Forum, everyone. So glad you're here. This will be airing the Monday before Christmas, and so I thought we would have a Christmas themed podcast today, and I'm really excited about that. But I wanted to first just really take a moment to share my gratitude for all the listeners and the way this podcast is beginning to take off, and just really appreciate all people who are listening, all people who give me feedback, all people who leave reviews, all people who donate, and all people who share, especially. It's really great to have this voice out in the world because this is a voice of hope and inspiration and awakening. And don't you think the world needs some of that? So that's what I'm about. I've got a really, really broad spectrum of guests and stories on this podcast. I don't really narrow it down. So anybody can get something from everybody because everybody has a unique story. And there's always a nugget of something that can land on your heart. I do know that because I learned something from everybody. So just so glad that everyone's here, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all of that. Okay, let me introduce my guest today. I'm so glad to have Katie, Mahon, and Joan Hill back. They are the authors of the Miracle Collectors, and if you may recall, they were my guests on episodes 144 and 145, which is back in July of 2021. And it just had so many amazing miracle stories. And today we're going to be talking about miracle stories around Christmas and around the holidays. So let me just introduce Katie. Katie Mahon became a miracle expert the hard way. At 19, she walked away from serial killer Ted Bundy with the help of a stranger who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Mahon has a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Santa Clara University, and she spent nearly 20 years in banking before staying home with her two daughters. A transplant from San Francisco Bay Area, Mahon now lives in New York City with her husband and enjoys chasing more than miracles with her three grandchildren. Is there an update there, Katie? Any more
Yeah,
than three?
four
Okay,
grandchildren.
I should have asked. Four grandchildren. Okay, Joan Louise Hill's introduction to miracles evolved as a series of coincidences that ultimately could not be ignored. After a 30-year career in medical administration and advancing innovative medical solutions, her expertise was put to the test to save the life of her son. She has a master's degree from University of Connecticut and a Bachelor of Science from Boston College, and having lived in several states with three adult children and families spread across the country, Joan and her husband are avid and constant travelers. And both these ladies wrote this wonderful book called The Miracle Collectors, and they shared their personal miracles in episodes 144 and 145. So I really invite you to go back and listen to those because it's a great couple podcasts. So anyway, welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having us, especially this time of year.
Yeah, Merry
Yeah.
Christmas.
Yeah, thank you. Merry Christmas to you all too. Happy holidays to everybody. I just to give everyone some background, I kind of scrambled to put this together because I was inspired by a friend of mine, Debbie Evan Rosales, and she used to be in my spiritual community when I was doing church. And she posted this most amazing miracle story on her Facebook page. And I'm like, wow, I would love to get people together to just talk about miracles that happened to them around Christmas and the holidays. And I didn't really have time to do that, but I did call the Miracle Collectors because they've got a collection of stories that they can share with you. But I thought that I would just share quickly my friend Debbie's story. She gave me permission to do so. And I probably have her on the podcast sometime because she has so many interesting encounters with spirit. So this is what she wrote. She shared this picture. I don't know if anybody. I don't know. I don't think this is going to show up very well. Okay. Anyway. Okay. It's a picture. It's a picture of a bunch of angels and kind of a chorus of angels. And I'll put that on the podcast page so you can see it better. And this is her story about it. She says, this picture reminded me of a Christmas miracle that happened one Christmas Eve. I was getting a divorce from my husband, I was getting a divorce, and my husband got to spend Christmas with my children. I never felt so alone that Christmas Eve without them. So I sat on the stairs of my empty living room and began to cry so hard, feeling so lonely and sad. Then all of a sudden, I felt illuminated snow is the best way I can describe the energy start to fall. It was so loving, I couldn't believe it. And then I felt the presence of angels, so thick, standing in circular rows above me, maybe 100, all sending me love. And then the most amazing thing happened. They all began to sing. I know some people say that Christmas is not true, but here I was included in their celebration. Joy to the world echoed in my home and in my heart. Silent Night, O Little Child of Bethlehem, and all the famous songs were sung. This went on for approximately a half an hour. And then she says, as I gaze upon this picture, I remember the time that I was invited into the circle of angels celebrating Christmas. So that's a pretty wild story.
It's a wonderful story.
That's a great story. That is absolutely a great story. And it just shows you how love transcends and comes to us, when we need it most, I think.
Yeah, and I think that the timing of those types of things it is when, as Joan said, we need it the most. And it reminds me of a story actually that I just thought of while you were telling that story, that I should know off the top of my head because it's actually in the book. But I have a sister whose birthday is around Christmas time, late December 17th to be exact. So is that tomorrow? I better not forget. But in any case, she was, our dad died when she was 18 years old, and she had just had a baby, at some point that year. And so her first daughter, Carolyn, was crawling around the living room floor, and there's Christmas music playing, and she just started to cry because it was a moment when she wished so much that Dad would have been able to know her then, or know that it was her birthday, or at least know of her daughter. And her daughter, Carolyn, goes and is pulling books, as little babies will do, off the bottom shelf of her bookshelf. And she pulls the Bible. Oh, and I have to go back a bit. My dad, he wrote us a letter every year on our birthday. And as Mary would say, she wasn't the best stewards of those letters. And as she was crying, she was thinking what I would give to have one of those letters now. I wish I'd kept them. I wish I'd, taken better care of them. And so anyway, Carolyn pulls out, one of the books she pulls out is the Bible, which flips open because there's a marker in it. And in the Bible is one of the letters from my dad. So that's kind of her miracle story. And obviously she picked up and she read the letter, and I have some of the words from the letter in the book. But it really was a testament to how love, as Joan said, transcends, even when somebody's gone, that sense of longing and having it show up at a time when you needed it the most.
Yeah, I think that our times of despair are, that bottom, that dark night of the soul, and that's, we're so vulnerable, so vulnerable. And that's the time where Spirit, God, the light, the source, the miracles, the angels, can really show up for us. And I think I think we know that the holidays are particularly hard for people who've experienced some kind of loss. And in the case of Debbie, it was the loss of her. She didn't physically lose her children, but she was having her first Christmas completely alone. And I love this story of your sister finding that letter.
It's so serendipitous. I mean, when I heard your story of your friend, I resonated with the sounds of angels singing, because that reminded me of one of the wonderful sort of historical stories that happened on Christmas Eve. And it was, in the middle of a forest in, deep, dark Belgium on Christmas Eve of 1914, in the middle of the Great War, World War I. And as the story goes, the nowhere to feel more alone, I suspect, than in a foxhole in the middle of a war zone with the, Germans on one side and the British on the other. And again, it was Christmas Eve. And as the story goes, the English heard singing. They heard noise coming from across the field. And the only contact these guys had with each other ever was either slinging bullets at each other, or in the very minimal, times when they'd raise a flag to be able to recover the dead from the battlefield. But this particular night, Christmas Eve, the Germans were singing Christmas carols. And then some of the British started singing Christmas carols. And then there was someone who said, come over here and let's sing together. like, no, we'll meet you halfway. There were some that spoke both languages. And they, in this beautiful story, they came out of their trenches in what was called the Christmas Eve truce. They came out of their trenches. They sang. There's a story that some wrote about that, and very apropos for World Cup. There was a soccer game that started between these 200, players. Someone pulled out a soccer ball. Someone was giving haircuts to the opposite people. They had a night that transcended the war, that was about Christmas and about the spirit of Christmas, which is love, and about peace that they certainly hoped for, and about their families. And as the dawn came, they went back to their respective trenches. And as we know, the war was not over for another 3 years, but it was a night of peace and of harmony, and of showing that, people could live together and be together side by side, which I think is such a hopeful message, especially as we're going through all that we're going through right now in the world.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. When I was doing church and I would do a Christmas Eve service, I mean, the message is not just there's this one day, but it's how we treat it. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if those soldiers could have had that Christmas Eve every day, like the next day and the next day? And my heart just goes out so much to them that they had to go back to following orders of these arbitrary authorities that told them you had to kill these people. And because what's so possible for us is to have that love transcends all every day, and it's definitely possible for us. And but that story is such an inspiration of being able to lay down your arms, whether that's the people you're fighting in the opposite trench, or maybe somebody that you've been fighting with or seeing in a certain light,
Well,
or somebody you've been unforgiving towards, or who has rejected you, that maybe we can lay down our arms and have a Christmas miracle this year too. Because I think, like you say, the world's and I've said this too, the world's in a very divided condition. So, who's we're taking the bait, who's going to make the change? We can do it, and we can create a Christmas miracle for ourselves and just stop being divided.
Well, one of the things we talk about a lot is how miracles basically help us see the commonalities and the similarities with each other. And I think that's what happened on that Christmas Eve. They, became one spirit. Whereas, so much of today, we're focused on our differences and how, we don't share the same kinds of things. And when we go around, and Katie and I talk about miracles, and we talk about the second really theme of the Miracle Collectors, we talk about connection and deepening connection. And that's about, finding things where we can connect. Sure, we're all going to have our differences. We're going to have difference of opinions. We have different hair color. We have different eye color. We have different everything. But we still are united in that human spirit.
And I think that's the thing about Christmas time. I mean, it is absolutely my favorite time of year. I ever since I was a little kid, and I think that it's because of, I mean, you touched on it, Carol, that it brings out the best in us some of the time over the holidays. And it would be wonderful if we could just do that all year round. And I think that some people do. One of the stories that we talk about that came to light after our manuscript was finished, but that we really, really love, happened in a relatively small town in Minnesota. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joan. But it was 2 years ago. Everybody remembers, the holidays over the first pandemic year. And this was a town that had been hard hit with job loss, et cetera. And there was a man who pulls up to a Dairy Queen window to order his lunch or, whatever it was, and decides that he's going to pay for the car behind him. Well, she pulls up to the window and they tell her that the guy in front of you just paid for your meal. And she says, well, I want to do it for the guy that's behind me. So anyway, and then that guy comes up. Well, this went on for 900 cars and 3 days. Now, nobody stopped to say, are you a Democrat or a Republican?
Right.
How do you feel about vaccines?
Right.
It was just, I want to do something nice for the person that's behind me. As Joan said, connection, I'm going to make a connection. And none of those things matter. And I think that that is literally the hallmark of miracle stories, is that everyone can relate and get beyond and get behind stories of kindness and love.
Yet I think about some of the shows that I grew up with, like The Grinch Who Stole Christmas and things like that, which is a huge miracle, a change of heart. Like it was like the Grinch had this change of heart. It wasn't like he changed any kind of aspect of his being other than his heart grew 3 times bigger. And same thing with Scrooge. You know, the Christmas stories that are told over and over and over again are these stories
Right.
of miracles and transformations. And you know, the original Christmas story, you know, whether it doesn't really matter to me what religion you are and whether you're Christian or not. It's an amazing story, and it's a story where all these different kinds of human beings came together miraculously on this one night. You know, it's like, how would that happen? You know it, and like I say, I don't know that it all happened on one night, but the way the story goes, it's this wonderful miracle that the shepherds that were kind of the low lifes of the world, and then there are these kind of these wise men or magi that are kind of have their own, you know, very kind of esteemed play way, and then the animals, and it's like it's a really good representation of everyone coming together around the birth of something new. And I feel like that could be happening now, if we can make that happen now, that we can all come together around the birth of something new.
I think that's very, very true. But it also brings up the point that, you know, we are all here, you know, sort of for a purpose, and we
Mhm.
can all sort of be the miracle for each other, you know, in a particular kind of way. And when you say that all these things came together that one night, or however it had happened, as we tell the story, you know, there's a wonderful story that again happened. It wasn't exactly Christmas, but it was this woman's birthday, and we all have birthdays, and we all can relate. And this one particular day, this one particular waitress in Orlando, Florida, was asked by a coworker if she would please pick up her shift. And you would think that maybe because it was her birthday, she might have said no. But she said, all right, I can do that for you. Um, and so fate placed her at her job, at this restaurant in Orlando. And
It
a
was
family.
New Year's Eve, by the way.
Hmm?
It
What?
was New
It
Year's
was
Eve.
New Year's Eve.
Oh,
Well,
it's
then there you
holiday.
go.
Yeah,
There
so
you
it
go.
was
So it's
it
still the
was the
holiday. So it's still
yeah,
the holiday.
it was over the holidays for
It
sure.
was absolutely all right. So it's a holiday story. I love the fact that it was a birthday story too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the best of all worlds. At any rate, a family comes in, a man, a woman, a child, um, a daughter, and the family doesn't order anything for the boy, who's looks to be 10 or 11 years old, which the waitress thinks is very odd, because all 11-year-old boys are always starving because they have a hollow leg going on. And so she thinks something's off and amiss. And so she looks a little closer, and she notices that the boy's got some sort of, you know, keeps pulling down his sweatshirt and keeps pulling up his sleeves, and she sees some scratches and some bruises, and she thinks, you know, this isn't normal. This isn't right. And through a series of coincidences, they had positioned themselves in the restaurant in a place where she could be seen from the kitchen and see the boy, but behind the parents where they couldn't see her. And she went to the kitchen and she wrote a sign, you know, are you okay? And, you know, do you need help? And to the first 2 signs that she wrote, he didn't respond. But the third time she asked, she just knew in her gut that something wasn't right, and she followed that instinct. And so she asked again, are you okay? Pulling up the sign. And he shook his head. You know, do you need help? Yes, I do. Um, she called her boss. She called the police. The police came and found out this young man had been tortured. He had bruises all over him. He had been hung upside down in some sort of bizarre contraption. He had, you know, evidence of broken bones and whatever. And they were convinced that had he not been taken from this home, had she not made a difference, his time on earth would be very, very limited. But things conspired to save the life of this boy, not least of which was this woman sort of stepping up and stepping out of her own comfort zone, because we never know what kind of a response we're going to get when we reach out to help someone. At any rate, I think it's a beautiful story, and it reminds us to just reach out and help people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm thinking about how many times I wonder if I don't know that I have, but how many times I wonder if I've seen something but I haven't acted. I just don't know. I mean, I'm not really conscious. Well, I'm conscious of a few things. I'm conscious of once not stepping in when I saw somebody hurting his dog. And that really, really, it haunts me. It haunts me, my life. Like, could I have said something? Could I have done something? I was actually kind of afraid of getting the middle of it. But what a wonderful story that first of all, that she said yes on New Year's Eve and her birthday. And second of all, that she just didn't have that feeling, that feeling about something's off. And I always kind of wondered, she actually came up with a really creative way to communicate with him. Boy, I'd be really interested in how he ended up. Do you know anything about that?
I think he's ended up, alive and placed in a foster home.
Yeah.
He turned out he was the mother's son, but not the stepfather's son. And
Mm.
there was a whole history of things.
So it was the
I had to let,
stepfather, yeah, the stepfather that was arrested and convicted of
Okay.
child
Yes.
abuse and child endangerment and, and who knows what. And that would have been New Year's Eve of 2020 to 2021.
Wow. This is pretty
So,
recent.
yeah, so
oh
it's
yeah,
not,
no, it's just very recent.
Yeah.
it's not that long ago, but whenever we have conversations, we always love to talk about this idea of being the miracle. And, we like to say, and we probably did in our first podcast with you, Carol, that, in the miracle business, we like to say, what your job is. And you just talked about a time when perhaps it was your job and you chose not to step in. I think it's always a risk. I think you have to make a rational choice in situations like that. But when we say, what your job is, we're not talking about, a formal job description. We're talking about the fact that you're the right person in the right place at the right time, which is exactly what happened for this waitress in Orlando, and happens to all of us actually more than we think. If you sort of conjure up all the people you come across, sometimes it's really just as simple as a smile,
Hmm.
So
that can maybe just make somebody's day. But obviously other times it's much more dramatic than that, as happened in the story that Joan just relayed. But we all have an opportunity to be the miracle for each other. And I think that theme also comes out at Christmas time, in literature, in movies. One of my favorite old time stories. Obviously, A Christmas Carol, Dickens' A Christmas Carol that you mentioned, Scrooge. That's a wonderful story about a change of heart. But there's also the story of O. Henry that published a story called The Gift of the Magi, which is
Oh gosh.
probably less well known,
Yeah.
but it's the story of a very poor couple who desperately wanted to buy each other something for Christmas. And Della has this beautiful hair, and she decides to go and sell her hair to purchase a watch chain for Jim, her husband, because his only real, valuable possession was a pocket watch. And so Jim, on the other hand, is thinking, I want to get Della something. And he decides to buy her these beautiful combs for her hair. Well, she chops off her hair to purchase the chain for his watch, and he sells the watch to buy the beautiful combs for her hair. And it's a story, obviously, about, love and sacrifice, and how the ultimate gift is to give everything that you have. And that's why I love that story. And that's why I think Christmas time, the biggest message is this idea, we have made it very commercial, but of course it's really about giving of yourself, giving whatever you have to give.
I think what's really interesting as well is this notion of, being the miracle for others is you try to think of something really special like the gift of the Magi, but you try to also, though it's little things, not every we talk a lot about sort of miracles being on this continuum from these sort of the thunderbolt miracles we always think about, the parting of the Red Sea or whatever, to, just small acts of kindness that occur in the grocery store or that occur. And I, as you said, I travel a lot. I came in last night, late into the San Francisco airport, and the Uber was waiting outside to take me to, where I'd parked my car some 50 miles away. And, but there was a woman, and it was a younger woman. She had two twin boys in a carriage, one of them howling. She looked exhausted already, and that wasn't all she had. She also had two big carts, luggage carts, packed high, stacked with stuff. And they were the kind of luggage carts, not the ones you just roll. They were the kinds that you have to push down before they move. I don't know if you've seen that kind. So she's only got two hands. She's got a carriage, and she's got these two carts that she has to push down to move. Now, she didn't realize that when she put the stuff on the cart, and when her husband left with the 3-year-old to park the car. So she's standing there in the doorway, and I'm just looking at her going, oh my God, do you need help? And she looked, and she was like, oh yes. So I tried, I took a cart, and then we started going. And then this other gentleman came, two of us were struggling. One of us was struggling with two things, and the other one had the carriage. She had the carriage. And this other gentleman came because let me help. And so he took a cart, and we're looking for the Lufthansa. It turns out she was going off for a week to visit her parents who lived in France. So she had all this stuff for an international flight. She didn't know where she was going. We ended up wandering around the airport for a while, finding the desk. And as we left her, and kind of with a smile, she goes, you're my Christmas angels.
Oh,
And
I love
we
that.
all have the ability to be a Christmas angel, because I have to tell you, it took me under 5 minutes. And, you just have to offer to help sometimes. And it just makes a difference.
I literally just heard another story that's kind of similar to that. A very old friend of mine, her daughter came to town, who I'd never met, and said, you have to go visit Katie. So she came over, and she was telling me a story of her flight from, Augusta, South Carolina to Charlotte. I mean, it was a very short flight, but there was a young mom on this flight who had like a 16-month-old child. And she was rushing to try and catch her next, her connection. And Devin, this young lady who came to visit me, she had all the time in the world. So she's trying to gather this, wait for the stroller and with the kid. She said, can I help you? So she literally hands her the kid, and she follows her to the next gate. And she's just waiting with this child while she goes up to recheck the stroller in and do whatever she had to do. And then she comes back and gets her child, and she's off, in the gate. Well, Devin starts to walk away, and a man came up to her, literally was crossing her. And she said, I don't think he was standing anywhere near me. But he came up to me, and he looked right in my eyes, and he said, everybody needs an angel.
Wow.
And, she goes, he literally came out of nowhere. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of a cool story.
That's very dear.
Very, very. And, I think that, kind of back to that Christmas story, I think I always teach also that all of the aspects of that story are us. It's kind of a way of looking at the story. It's not like they're all out there. So we are the angel. We are the star. We the guiding light. We are the angels that sing and that are joyful and that help. And we are the lowly shepherds, and we are the mother and the father and the baby. So I love this. I just love this idea of being the angel, because I think we're always looking out there for the angels. Who's going to be my angel today? But ultimately it comes back. It comes back to pointing to us, and we can be an angel to anyone. These stories about the children, this is kind of an aside. It has nothing to do with this, but I remember when I was pregnant, especially when you have the big belly, for me, I remember people being so kind and opening doors and helping me with everything. But once I had the baby and the stroller and the packages and the suitcases and the everything, I'm stuck at the door. No one's helping.
Oh, well,
I think we
when
become afraid. I think sometimes there's fear
Oh,
involved with trying
and
to
being
help
helpful.
somebody
Yeah.
because, people go, no, I can do it myself or whatever. And sometimes it takes effort to accept help.
Hmm.
You see that uncertainty, like, are they helping me because they just want to help? Or are they helping me because they're going to pick my pocket? Or are they helping me because there's an ulterior motive? We become very, jaded and fearful in a particular kind of way. And so that's why sometimes we talk about this notion of sort of miracle courage, of like, a miracle vision, and, trying to see things in a different way, and trying to be brave and offering to help. Because even if somebody says, no, I don't need your help, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is, I think, that you see something that you could have helped and you didn't stop, and then it bothers you.
Yes.
Um, and that to
well,
me is the worst that can happen. So therefore, it behooves us all to just, make the effort and try. But and I think that story in Minneapolis, the reason I particularly love that story is I love this notion that good works, that paying it forward, is contagious. It shows that it can, all of us can participate in that. And that notion of, we know bad things like the flu or COVID are contagious, but it's wonderful to think that, generosity of spirit and joy and, love is also contagious.
I think that it's important to also focus on, which you touched upon, Joan, the idea that it's also really hard to accept help. And that it's important that all of us, you know, ask for help when we need it and accept it when it's offered, if in fact we need it. Because, again, it gets back to that connection piece. But Carol, when you first reached out about a Christmas miracle, podcast, I had just reacquainted myself with a story that's, It's a Wonderful Life. And I think part of it is that, when you think about the movies that you love the most, I mean, how many of them are from Christmas time? The
Right.
Beautiful Wife, It's a Wonderful Life, The Holiday, Love Actually, whatever. I mean, they are so uplifting and joyful. But this particular story happened a few years back, and it is almost identical to It's a Wonderful Life in a way, but it's a real life version of it. When a disabled New York NYPD officer who had kind of fallen on hard times. He was an admitted alcoholic. His father had recently died, who was also an NYPD officer. He'd lost his girlfriend. And on 9/11, he was sleeping in with a hangover and woke up to find the Twin Towers had fallen, and that this idea that his, you know, fellow officers that he had known and loved had rushed in to help while he slept off a hangover it was just his self-loathing and how he felt about himself. It just was more than he could take. And over that fall, he went to some 20 funerals for his friends and associates, and he decided that the next funeral was going to be his own. He just couldn't live with himself anymore. So on Christmas Eve, he boards a train to Albany because he had helped out a couple a few years before, and they had told him about a beautiful place near Lake George. And he thought, well, at least I can get some peace. And that's where he was going to go. He brought his father's Bible and his father's revolver with him on this train ride. That's all he had. And all he wanted was to be left alone on this train ride. And this older woman comes over, sits next to him, and starts to chat him up, which irritated him to no end. And he just thought, I don't want, this is not what I want, And so he's trying to in fact, he was initially rude to her. But she just keeps chatting away about her life. And he's just thinking, I can't even believe this is happening to me. But slowly, she got him to open up about his own life. And he started to talk. And her compassion for him in listening to this story was so much that he got very emotional, and just couldn't believe that someone could understand that there was anything redeeming about him at all, really. And so as they're pulling into Albany, she leaves and she comes back with a note on a pink piece of paper that she hands to him. And she says, Dean was his name, Dean, I don't know where you're going, but when you get there, read this. And so he gets off the train. It's Christmas Eve during the day. He makes his way to this place near Lake George up a trail, and he sits down and he opens up her letter, which now I'm going to have to find exactly what it says, unless Joan, you have it right there. But the gist of it was that, Dean, never forget that life is, oh, you have it?
I do.
Oh, yay.
Dean, life is a gift meant to be shared. Don't ever give up hope. Merry Christmas, Erin.
So life is a gift meant to be shared. Don't ever give up hope. And he sat there and he stared at this message from her, and slowly the weight on his shoulders started to lift. Eventually he got up, he emptied the chamber of the gun, he got up, he made his way back down the trail. Over a very short period of time thereafter, he stopped drinking. He moved to Florida to kind of start over. He was also a veteran, and he found his calling in helping other veterans. He met the woman that he would later marry, completely changed his life around. And he put Erin's note in his father's Bible. He made attempts to locate her in Albany. He knew she was a grandmother. He had some details about her life, of course. He was never able to find her. I just thought it was one of the most beautiful stories, but a Christmas story that actually mirrored George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life almost to a T. She wasn't Clarence, she was Erin, but definitely an angel.
Wow, that's incredible. That's an incredible story. And it does remind us that we can be those angels. And I think the other thing that really moves me about that is I think that we completely forget that everyone, especially if you're in despair, um,
Mm.
that everyone just wants to be seen. You may not know that. You may think that you don't want to be seen. Like he felt all the survival guilt and wanted to just disappear. But what she did, sitting next to him, annoying him at first, and then just continually having him, allowing him to open up. And he only opened up to her because she saw him.
That's right.
She could see through all the layers to his heart, to his soul, and we can bear witness to everyone in that way. And it is such a gift, and it can take some emotional energy, because you do have to kind of go over that activation energy of, well, what will they think, and is this right, or do they want to be left alone? But it's really just a matter, I think, of really listening to your intuition. Like the woman who was the server who helped the little boy. Listen to that intuition, that voice inside. She must have been guided to sit by him and talk.
Oh, right. Oh, absolutely. And what she gave him, I think, and as you put it in such a beautiful way, that we all just want to be seen. I think she handed him his worthiness back.
Yes.
He was worthy of love. And, as was this little boy. And that's why she tried so hard to make sure she got an answer out of him, the waitress. But yes, I think that these people that just, show up at the right time, in the right place. It's truly amazing.
It also kind of reminds us to be out in the world, to be out in the world and be keep our awareness out. I think sometimes we can get very stuck in our own place and our own little world with our own friends and our own social structure, or especially during COVID when we were all, in lockdown, or, we were all stuck, and a lot of people, I know people who haven't come out yet. They're still in their homes. They're still staying in their homes in fear. And not only are you denying yourself life and being out, you experiencing the world, but you're also denying yourself to be that opportunity to show up for someone out there in the world. And I think that story just really, really, really touches me. And
Well, I think it's we put out this monthly newsletter where we talk about these kinds of stories. And one of the things that, Katie goes on to talk about is this beautiful sort of tribal philosophy from Africa about Ubuntu, which is, I see you. We are connected. We're alive because we see each other. We and we need that. Isolation is a very, very dangerous thing for us. And so we need to have, be out in the world. But we can also be attentive from our own homes. And that's to lead to another sort of holiday in the 12 days of Christmas story. That's what a woman in Denver did as she looked out her window on the 12th day of Christmas that overlooked a pond. Again, kind of, Katie, going back to It's a Wonderful Life and the opening scene of kids
Oh,
going down
right.
the slide hill, and then George's brother falling into the drink, as this young woman, 23-year-old, looked out her window. She saw 3 children, skating on the ice, which was great until they fell in.
oh my gosh.
And she ran out her door, and she was able to pull 2 of the children out of the lake. The third child, however, was still in, and as she tried to get closer, the ice under her broke, and she also went into the, I guess it was a pond more than a lake. She also went into the pond. So she, went over to the child who by now had passed out, trying to keep her head above water, and was able to do so until help arrived, because then others had seen what had happened and came and whatever. And all 3 children survived, but only because of her quick thinking and her ability to say, okay, I'm here, but I can also be a person out there, person of the world, somebody who's able to assist. Again, being the right person in the right time. This woman was 23. You don't have to be old. You can be young. And there are just these, wonderful things that just happen as a matter of course of life. And by, practicing that philosophy of Ubuntu, where we see each other, and then people recognize that they're seen, giving someone feedback and identifying that worthiness, I think is a huge miracle. It's what we try to do with our children, right? Try to express that they're worthy, and
Yes.
they're worthy of love, and that they're worthy of, faith, and all of those things.
Well, so Joan, we wrote an entire chapter called, 90% of life is showing up. So Carol, your point about you have to put yourself out there. And it reminds me of, I was watching the Today Show, and they were interviewing a 97-year-old physician who still goes to work every day. And she said something that I thought was so powerful, which was, they said, well, why do you do it? And she said, well, because I may have what someone else needs. I may be the one person that is offering, that right person something that they need to hear, or, and I just thought, yeah, you might be the person that has a message, not couched in that way, of course, but that, resonates with someone else because of something that you say, or that you're there. And Joan, this is a really big topic for Joan, who always shows up. everywhere, all the time.
Thank you, Katie.
So, and Joan's whole thing is it's not just about physically showing up. I mean, you have to have the energy to engage with people, and to care about them, to be an observer, to be aware, as you put it, Carol. So yeah, I think, and of course, again, Christmas time, there's lots of opportunities. I think Joan and I are absolutely on the same wavelength in terms of being out there with all the stuff that's going on. I'm kind of like, you know what? I gave COVID a year, and now life's too short. Who knows?
I feel the same way.
Got
Life's
left
too
as a
short.
grandmother. I'm like, I'm out there.
We gotta live. We gotta live. Even if we die living, we gotta live.
You got exactly. If you die
yeah.
living, then you die
There's
living. But
yeah.
you gotta live.
There's
Yeah,
a wonder.
I just want to make a really quick point, Joan, before we go on. One is this idea of being out there. I do know that introverted people go, that's not me, that's not me. And I don't think it has to do with extroversion at all. It's
No.
an attitude, it's a way of being. And the metaphor that I want to pull from the story of the 23-year-old and the rescue of the children is the metaphor of looking out the window. Like you can be in your home, you can be in your body, you can be a quiet person, but if you have a way of being that metaphorically is looking out the window, meaning you're able to have your awareness be outside of you and 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 maybe seeing, what is there for me today? You don't have to be extroverted. You don't have to be out there in the world talking to people to have that kind of attitude and that way of being in life. I just want to make that point before you go on.
No, that's a wonderful point, and that's exactly right. I mean, Helen Keller had a wonderful thing that she said that, when we do the best we can, right? We show up however it is that we show up. We do the best we can. We never know what miracles might be wrought in the life of another. I mean, I think that's the point. We don't even have to know that it's made a difference to someone else, because you just never know. People might come up to you years later and go, oh, when you said, and we have, there are stories certainly about that, what a difference you can make in someone's life. And that's the beauty of, what we kind of call the ripple effect of miracles, or the ripple effect of being in the world, because we all have that ability to be that miracle for someone else.
Yeah, and that woman, what was her name? Erin? I can't remember. The woman who wrote the Erin who wrote the letter.
Erin.
Yeah, she'll never know. She'll never know the impact that she had on that man, and it's okay.
And that's okay.
And that is okay. And the three of us that are sitting here that's happened both for us, and we've been the conduit for others, and have no idea. Because I'm sure all of us have been in a situation where someone tells you later on. I mean, I remember going out with a couple that anyway, they came to visit New York City, and he said to my husband, I remember the note that you wrote me 20 years ago when I had this medical crisis, and what you said. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me.
Yeah.
These are things that, you're lucky if you find out, but we all do things that we don't necessarily have any idea the impact that we have.
Although it's really nice sometimes when we do.
Well, that's about gratitude and being proactive about telling people thank you and how much they mean to you. And again, that's a holiday thing, but it should happen all year long, that we express that kind of thing. Absolutely.
I think that's right. And I think, one of the really nice things sometimes is that one of the things that's happened sort of with the Miracle Collectors sometimes is someone will give the Miracle Collectors book as a gift to someone. And then years later, I just got a call this week from someone who said, that person in this book helped me, and I just needed to read, I needed to hear, I needed to see. And thank you for that. And they, call and say, thank you. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that's what keeps us going on this, miracle journey to a particular sense, is because you just never know who needs to hear that, miracle message, that message of whether it's empowerment or whether it's just of inspiration or of hope. It's something that we all, I think it's important to be reminded of.
Yeah, we do never know. And that's how I look at this podcast, that it goes out into the airwaves, it goes out into the world. There are people listening all around the world. I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea, but there's thousands of people out there. And I always say, if it's going to land on the heart of at least one person, it's going to land on the heart of at least one person. Every podcast that I put out there, some one person out there, maybe a lot more, but even if it's just one, that's an amazing gift, and that's a great thing. And I never know, but I just trust. I have faith that I'm inspired to do this work, as you guys are inspired to do this work, your work, that it goes out there, and the rest is okay. Spirit's in charge the rest of the way. It's going to land on the right person's heart, and that's going to be enough. That's how I feel about it.
There's a quote that we have in the book that I'm about to butcher, but it's worth mentioning. I think his name is Kent Newburn, said something along the lines of, we live, around our tiny hearth fires, ordinary lives. But our light, our small flicker of light, may be exactly what someone lost in the dark needs to see. And I love that idea that, you don't have to be, these don't have to be grand gestures. You don't have to be famous. This is about your ordinary life and putting out your light, that may be exactly what somebody needs at that moment. And I love that. I love that idea of light. And again, Jesus as light, the light of the world. And that, I think, is probably my favorite, sort of idea of God, is that it's light and it's love.
Well, yeah, and he said, "You are the light of the world." So, we are light, and
Yes,
and
yes,
that was a big part of the message. And to go and
yes,
love everyone, love your enemies,
right,
love people who hate you,
right,
love your neighbor, love everybody. That was the whole message that light that came into the world gave to us. and
right, right,
and
right.
so, and I think we fret about, well, the world just really sucks and the world's so dark and look at how bad things are, we're so divided, and all of that's true, and it doesn't have any real impact on my choice to to be my light in my way. It has zero impact on that. I mean, the whole world can go dark, and I can say, this little line of mine, I'm going to make it shine. I can choose that, but it's not like all the stuff that's going on in the world can overcome any one of our ability to choose to bring love and light to this moment now. We have this at every moment, and that's a miracle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think when people hear the word miracle, they think, oh, come on. I mean, how can you believe in miracles when all this tragedy, and truly horrible things happen every single day? And I guess, our answer is that, first of all, as Joan said earlier, miracles are on this continuum. And, Einstein and his, there's only two ways to live your life. One is as though everything is a miracle, and the other is though, nothing is a miracle. Obviously, I think the three of us are, in the same camp on that. But when it comes to the world and how dark it can be, I think miracles offer us an opportunity to shift our focus. Yes, acknowledge this is there. It's terrible. But to shift our focus to hope, to love, the light, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I come back to that original story. I mean, the whole world could be going to pot, but this little baby was born, and every little
Mhm.
baby comes in as that light,
Right.
almost coming coming from the divine world, heaven, whatever people want to call it, and every birth, and they happened in the middle of war. They happen at, battlefields. They happen, in all sorts of tragedies. But there's always something else going on. I actually had a podcast guest earlier this week. He's going to be published after this one, though. And he quoted someone, I can't remember who it was, but um, the key is that whatever tragedy is happening now, there's always something else happening. There's always something else going on. And so we can find that other thing that is a bright light, that is a message of love, that is the angel, and focus on that versus the tragedy that's befell us right in front of us.
Mhm.
And a perfect example of that, which we do talk about in the book, and I apologize, this isn't exactly a Christmas story, but it's a perfect example of what you just said. And that's that on 9/11, and how can there be too many things that are worse than that? All of the boats out into the water without any coordination whatsoever among themselves or anything else. They tugboats, party boats, ferry boats, commuter boats, whatever they were, they turned around and headed toward the south end of Manhattan when they saw the black smoke. Unaware of whether another attack was coming, unaware of what could possibly happen to them. Instead of running away, they ran into this dangerous, terrible situation. And 500,000 people had run to the south tip of Manhattan to escape the whiteout conditions, the terrible thing that was going on, because actually that was their only direction that they could go.
Mm.
And then eventually the Coast Guard did get involved and did start to coordinate all of these boats. But in a matter of 9 hours, it was the largest maritime rescue, I think, in history, including Dunkirk. I think it's like in Dunkirk, it took, 9 days, but on September 11th, it took 9 hours, and they got all 500,000 people off of Manhattan. And it really was the story of people choosing to look at what they could do, how they could help, and turned catastrophe into really hope and wonder at what they accomplished. It was an amazing, amazing thing to see, apparently.
Well, and I is a wonderful story and a wonderful outpouring. And it's, I think one of the things that we do is rise to the occasion often. But one of the things that is so important, I think, for people to recognize is that it's not just in these major times of calamity and horror that, the better angels can sing, but it's really, we each have our small, as you said earlier, Katie, our small light to contribute, even though there's darkness in around us, and that it's losing hope to think that our light is not worth anything, or we can't contribute anything, or we can't change anything. That's where, sort of evil really resides in my mind, when it, quells and quenches the human spirit, which is in all of us, to be able to be that miracle for others, to be able to let our light shine, to be able to be that, that right person in the right place at the right time, who can do only what we can do. We should never lose sight of the importance of that in things big and small.
Yeah, I think that's quite a theme for today. That's quite a
Yes.
theme. Yeah. Because I think it's interesting. Last night I had a dream, and I don't remember the whole dream, but I remember being in a situation with a group, and I remember this person that I was in this group with voicing all these lies about us. The point is, without going into that, is, do I speak or do I walk away? And in the dream, I walked away, and I woke up, and I'm like, why did I walk away? My psyche is telling me that there's something I need to say, something I need to do. And I appreciate that my psyche is creating that for me because it was kind of an elaborate dream for that to come about. But that's exactly what you're talking about. The evil lies in the indifference, or the evil lies in the
Yes.
quietness, the evil lies in
Yeah.
the non-action. And and we aren't always in situations where we can be in action, but that we ought to be having that looking out the window kind of attitude, because and being ready and being willing to step out, say something or do something, or be something, or go towards the danger.
Well, there's a big, branding theme in New York since 9/11 that's on every subway. And, it says, if you see something, say something,
Mm,
but it's really a true thing for all of us. And I love your metaphor of looking out the window. I think that's great. I mean, I know it's associated with this story from a literal standpoint, but I love the idea of having us all be aware of looking out our own window.
yeah. Okay, ladies, we got a few more minutes. Do you have another story to tell, or
Well,
anything else you want to?
the one story that I thought was kind of an interesting one, and as I thought about it, I thought it was kind of the no room at the inn sort of story,
Okay.
which was, and it was told to us by when we were being interviewed by one of the radio announcers after publication of the book. He had told us that he had had a job in a rectory, and this day after high school, or after school, and this one day the priest looked very tired and kind of, a little distraught, and he sort of said, well, what happened? And the priest explained to him that he had been up all night because this distraught person had come to his door and really needed to talk, and it turned out he was kind of a famous entertainer type, and they had spent most of the night until dawn talking, and he was having a crisis of faith, and he sort of talked. They both, or the person, felt much better as he left, as the sun was coming up, and before the gentleman left, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of bills. And the priest said, no, that's not, this is my job. This is what I do. I get up in the night, I talk to people. No, you have to take this. And he the person opened the drawer and put this wad of cash in, and left. Well, the priest went to bed until he was woken a couple hours later by a parishioner who had come in. A gentleman had a wife and two small children, and they had been evicted from their apartment, so they were homeless, and he just could not deal with his family having to live in the car. And he had gone to social services, he had gone to whatever, he had found a place, but he needed to have, and they said, yes, you qualify, yes, you'll get money, but it's going to take time for us to, go through all the paperwork and get all the approvals and actually get the checks. But he didn't feel that he had time. He needed this one apartment today, and he needed the money today, and he needed to talk to someone. So he'd gone to see the priest, and the priest said, well, I don't know what really you want me to do. Have you talked to, charities? Have you gone to here? Have you gone there? And he said, no, I need this first month's rent. I need a security deposit. I need this other amount. And the priest said, well, I don't, we don't have that money. And then he kind of remembered, a light bulb went on, and he opens his drawer and he pulls out this wad of bills that he had been given like 3 hours earlier, and he counts out the bills and change. And sure enough, it's the exact amount of money that this person needed to get the apartment. And it just reminded me of sort of this no room at the inn. You have to go, and you have to ask, and you have to pull out all the stops, and then you have to just be willing to accept the inevitable of what's there. And I think that, that's one of the quotes Katie and I most love is from Willa Cather, which is, where there is great love, there are always miracles. And it's so true. It kind of just really reminded me of that story. And this family had a place to live.
I
And
love
all of the
that.
things that had to play into that to make that happen.
And the priest needed to be able to receive.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's the
yes.
other part that's so interesting,
Yeah,
that no. It's receive. And that who knows what miracle will come out of receiving.
Exactly. We
Right,
all have to
exactly.
remember that because as Katie alluded to earlier, we all have a hard time with saying okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's probably how regifting began. One of the Christmas traditions.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I kind of want to wrap this up. I don't want to wrap this up. I'd love to keep going, but Katie and Joan, just for everybody who's listening, I think I emailed you like 2 days ago and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing this?" And I didn't even know if I had the right emails anymore. And you both said, "Yeah, let's do it." And then we kind of scrambled to find a time, and we did it. It's a miracle that we came together to do this, And because
Meant
I
to
think the
be.
last time we talked was a year and a half ago. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So it was all about we had looking out the window attitudes. Oh, I'm so
We did, and
grateful.
it was really fun to talk to you again, Carol. So thank you. And of course, Joan and I are always willing to talk about miracles and miracle stories. But like I said, my favorite time of year, and what better time of year to talk about miracles?
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely.
What better time of year? So we'll just send these wonderful blessings out to everybody. And just to encapsulate what we just talked about, it seems like, look out the window, be willing to receive. You're an angel. We're all angels. It doesn't have to be big. It can be the tiniest little things. We don't have to know how we impacted people. But if we just follow our own light and listen to our own intuition, we will be in the right place at the right time for ourselves and for others, and to be open to receiving from others who are in the right place in the right time for us. I think that kind
Yes,
of covers it all.
I think
Perfectly.
I think it was a great summary.
Thank you so much, Carol. We really enjoyed being with you and do have a happy, happy holiday.
Yes, you too. You
Thank
too.
you.
Katie, Joan, and everyone who's listening. And I now close the spiritual forum.